Hi, everybody. This is Derek from Action A Go Go, reporting from the trenches of entertainment. I am the editor-in-chief of Action A Go Go, doing a video in our series of car rides, talking about various aspects of movies and entertainment. And this episode's going to be a fun one. We're going to do a post-mortem on the movie Solo, the latest installment in the Disney franchise, Star Wars. It's official, folks. Star Wars, A Solo Story, is a loser at the box office. Latest estimates, I think it lost Disney $50 million, which is pretty unprecedented. I mean, it bombed, and there's no real way around that. And I think there's a couple of different aspects to this, and it's going to be a lot of fun going over this, essentially. But, I mean, to give you some background on myself, I mean, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. A lot of people out there are huge Star Wars fans. You know, I've read the comics, I've read Star Wars books, effectively called Star Wars Legacy Entertainment now. Of course, watched the movies when I was a kid, watched the movies multiple times. I watched the Ewok movie, which was fun. Never seen the Christmas special, but, you know, and then, of course, I was excited when Disney announced, just to go full circle here, right? Because I think a lot of things led up to Star Wars Solo being a bomb, okay? So famously, it was the 3 films, and then the original trilogy came out in 77, ended around 83. And then we had the prequels, which came out after many decades. Highly anticipated. I saw all those in the box office. Widely panned critically by fans and critics. But interestingly enough, they made lots of money. Lots and lots and lots of money. And then the movies were dormant through much of the 2000s and 2010s. Well, actually, I might be getting my years mixed up here a little bit. Until Disney bought Star Wars, I want to say around 2012 or so, or maybe 2010, a while ago. They bought Star Wars from George Lucas, and Lucasfilm bought Lucasfilm. And Lucas, I could have a whole video about George Lucas and how great he is at the end of the day. A lot of people are upset with George Lucas about the prequels and, you know, what he did to supposedly taint the legacy of Star Wars. But it's really weird that people hate him for that, considering that, you know, he created ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, which is the bedrock of special effects in Hollywood for, like, many, many, many Hollywood films that you know and love. He created Skywalker Sound, which, again, many, many, many movies that you know and love. Sound is a very important part of that experience, and that's where directors like David Fincher, others, went to do the sound on their movies, and perfect the sound on their movies. So, you know, Lucas didn't need to sell to Disney at the time. Star Wars originally was released with 20th Century Fox in the 70s and early 80s. There's lots of stories about George Lucas and his relationship with Fox. It started out well, but Fox pretty much gave the rights to George Lucas, which led to a tumultuous relationship because they were basically upset about that. You know, Lucas made a lot of money off those movies, and Fox was sort of just left as the distributor. But anyway, fast forward to Disney buying Fox and making these movies. I mean, it was bittersweet at the time. You know, Lucas was ready to get out of the business. He was ready to retire, give his legacy away, essentially, to Disney, who, for all intents and purposes, you know, Star Wars, had an independent spirit at first, and it was like a ragtag group of hooligans who really made this amazing special movie. But it couldn't just go to anybody, right? It couldn't go to any studio. And at the time, Disney, it's still at the height of its powers, but was really at the height of its powers, was in the best position to maximize Star Wars in all the avenues you could ask for, in terms of comics, in terms of TV shows, in terms of movies, most importantly. And, you know, Disney did do that with films. With the films The Force Awakens, Star Wars Rogue One, The Star Wars Story, or whatever the title is, and then Star Wars The Last Jedi. And, I mean, people were really excited for these movies. But I think a lot of problems that I saw in the first films have sort of come back to haunt Disney here. And, you know, again, this is a post-mortem of Star Wars, we're going to get to it soon, but you really need to look at the progression of these movies, right, that Disney has made. There's no real excuses anymore. Like, people really got upset with George Lucas. People threw George Lucas under the bus. And people have gradually taken credit away from George Lucas in different ways, you know, from the success of Star Wars. But Disney doesn't have any excuses now, right? Like, these are Disney films. This is Disney leadership. This is the Disney secret sauce. And I was one of the people who, when The Force Awakens came out, or the lead up to The Force Awakens, I was watching the trailers like, this looks like a remake of A New Hope, you know, the first Star Wars film, which I was not really interested in. You know, I was looking for something new to come out of the House of Mouse. You know, I've been a lifelong Disney fan too. Who isn't? You know, lifelong Marvel fan as well. And that movie really didn't do it for me with The Force Awakens once I actually saw it, because it was a remake of A New Hope. And, you know, J.J. Abrams was famously heading it. J.J. Abrams is a big blockbuster director. He's also a big MacGuffin director. And, I mean, my experience with Star Wars The Force Awakens was, you know, I felt like the first third of the movie was pretty good. You had a great buildup of Rey. Poe Dameron was a lot of fun. Finn, I didn't really like as a character. I think he was a great actor playing Finn, but I just felt like the character was a bit too goofy, if that makes any sense. Like, a bit too comedic all the time, and, you know, not a good foil for Rey, so much as the movie forced itself along to make that the situation. And, I mean, so I thought the first quarter of the film was really good. Finn's story as well, his development. But as things wound up, and it drove into it had this blockbuster pacing that didn't feel like Star Wars to me. And then some things just clicked in a bit too easily, plot-wise. There was a lot of plot points in the film that felt like, oh, you know, Rey just knows how to fly the Millennium Falcon, and she knows how to do this, and she knows how to do that. And I think a lot of people, here's where you got to attack this bear in the room, the elephant in the room. You know, a lot of people thought she was a Mary Sue, and this is part of some feminist agenda that Disney is pushing, like Rey being this great character, and all the men in the movie being there, you know. God, I can't believe I'm forgetting the guy's name while making the movie. The new Darth Vader, you know, he was a whiny brat, and Finn is an idiot, and Poe Dameron was sort of cool, but also, you know, oddly exuberant at times. Not the rugged pilot type from some of the original films. But anyway, so I was a bit sour on it. However, the movie made so much money, and a lot of people loved it. They thought it was great. They thought it was much better than the prequels. Some people claimed it was better than the original trilogy. I had to disagree. I thought it was sacrilege. But then moving on to Rogue One, something interesting happened with the Star Wars films. they swapped out directors. I think Gareth Edwards was originally directing, and then it got to the point where there was a trailer that came out for the film with a lot of footage that didn't make it to the original cut of the movie that was released in theaters. I'm sorry, a lot of footage that didn't make it to the theatrical cut that was released in theaters. And that was because he was taken off the project. And Disney spun that a lot of ways. They said, oh, this is just a light re-edit, etc., etc. But when that happens on a film, that's really the kiss of death for a movie. Like when something like that happens, something's going wrong with the production. And it's usually creative differences, it's usually what direction a director's taking, etc., etc. Famous example of that is Fantastic Four. The most recent Fantastic Four edition that Fox did, the director was famously taken off the project, and the movie was taken over by a different director and cut into a final edition. And the movie was god-awful. The second half of the movie is a complete split from the first film, and that's how you really can tell and that's the negative consequence of this sort of situation. Like, people try and spin it the best they can, but when you swap directors, it's usually really bad. Now, one studio under the Disney umbrella was able to do this with minimal consequences, and that was Marvel. And the director of Ant-Man was originally, oh gosh, I'm gonna forget his name too. Terrible video maker, but I'm sorry. But the person who originally was set to direct Ant-Man left over creative differences after laying the foundations for much of the film. And how it usually works is a director will stay on for those beginning phases and then stay through to the creative finale of the film, like directing it, editing it, and then you have that director's stamp on the movie. But Marvel has famously been able to swap out talent with minimal consequences, and that's a real Marvel thing, that Marvel's been able to do that. And I think Disney tried to do it with Star Wars, and with Rogue One, the movie was still, going back to Rogue One, the movie was still good. I liked Rogue One. I got what they were trying to do, but there was just the beginning of the movie was a bit of a mess. Sorry, I'm messing with my phone here, trying to straighten it out. I thought the beginning of the movie was a bit of a mess. Interestingly enough, it was another female-focused lead, like another British girl lead, which I thought was a bit repetitious, and it felt the same way, sort of like that Fantastic Four effect, where the beginning of the film felt like a bit of a mess, and that it was really forcing itself along. However, I thought the finish of the film was amazing. Like, that movie ends with what is probably the best, I want to say, star fight. that classic interstellar spaceship battling. Like, it was really good. Much better than what J.J. Abrams brought to the table in The Force Awakens. It felt more like Star Wars. And to give an idea of what I'm saying, like Star Wars, the dog fights, the X-Wing fights, the TIE fighter fights, those ships actually move like planes would. Like graceful arcs, as if they're flying in an atmosphere, more so than, I don't know, some of the forced physics you see in the J.J. Abrams films. Like in the J.J. Abrams movies, there's unnatural movement to the spaceships at certain points. And that sort of brings me to The Last Jedi, which is the third Disney film, which also had, to me, some unnatural dogfights. Or the way Poe Dameron flies his ship around was a bit overly dramatic in the beginning of The Last Jedi. So about to get to The Last Jedi. But anyway, Rogue One, I thought, ended great as a film. Obviously, audiences were receptive to it, which gave a lot of hope to, the rest of the movies and the idea that you can keep pumping out Star Wars films. But there were some criticisms to it, you know. But I think a lot of that finally came to a head with The Last Jedi. I mean, The Last Jedi came out the end of last year, highly anticipated, made lots of money, but there were a lot of things that were really telling about the reception to the film. I mean, one of the aspects of it was famously, you know, there was a huge disconnect between the Rotten Tomatoes critic score and the fan score. Now, some of that was down to people rigging the system, so to speak. Like, I don't know, they blamed mansplaining hackers or something like that. But I think Rotten Tomatoes defended itself and said, like, look, it can't really happen. So there's a big disconnect on Rotten Tomatoes, and I don't usually trust Rotten Tomatoes anyway. And you saw a lot of complaining about the story of the movie. And I watched the movie. I thought it was a very well done movie, but I have to agree with some of the haters, like, in certain respects. Now, here's where I have to say, like, this isn't me mansplaining. This isn't me, you know, being an alt-right Nazi. But I have to say, like, some of the focus was on the wrong characters. You know, like, The Force Awakens built up Luke Skywalker pretty well, you know, for a movie I didn't like. But then the Luke Skywalker we got really wasn't the Luke Skywalker I remember, you know, from the original films, like the brash hero who was willing to fly into danger at the drop of a hat, you know. But I understood, like, he was trying to be a Jedi Master now. Jedi Masters behave differently than, you know, the young upstart Jedis famously do. And there's other aspects too, like, you know, the casino trip to the film. I think it was trying to tackle some various themes about the movie, or I'm sorry, it was trying to tackle more adult themes, but it felt like a big pointless mess. And then, spoilers ahead, by the way, we're going to get heavy into this one. If you haven't seen the movie, if you're probably like one of two people that hasn't seen the movie. But then the plot itself for The Last Jedi. I mean, there's no resistance, followed by, like, a very hurt New Republic, or whatever the hell they call it. I don't know. First Order, excuse me. There's a new First Order, and the First Order's hunting the Resistance down, but there's no resistance in the galaxy, and there's plenty of First Order after they got blown up in The Force Awakens, and they got blown up at the beginning of the movie, and then Captain Pinkhair, this new character who shows up, sacrifices herself to take out the the entire fleet, or General Pinkhair, excuse me, whatever she was. And I just thought, like, Star Wars, the core movies, like, they're supposed to be about Skywalkers. They're supposed to be, famously, I think Lucas said, they're supposed to be a family drama. You know, they're supposed to be a space opera. And these movies just, The Last Jedi, to me, didn't feel like that. You know, it's about these new characters that frankly aren't that interesting, and these movies are forcing themselves along with blockbuster pacing, and I think they just made plot mistakes at the end of the day. Like Rey as a character, I think she was finally having a great progression. I loved how she was, like, flirting with Kylo Ren. Sorry for forgetting his name before. Famous bad guy from The Force Awakens, taking up the mantle. And they tried to explain Kylo Ren. Like, I thought that wasn't bad in The Last Jedi. But it was just lame towards the end. Like, her parents are nobodies? Well, then again, you wasted the entire Force Awakens with trying to get us to get into her backstory and create these mysteries that go nowhere. It's like a trip to MacGuffin City. So I think so. Anyway, to wind it down here, again, we're going to get to Solo. A lot of people didn't like the movie, I don't think, for various reasons, and a lot of people there's this undercurrent of alt-right toxicity or something that people are talking about and all this other stuff. But I think a lot of core fans are just tired of these films. The core movies were the Skywalkers. The Star Wars Legacy universe was about the Skywalkers, or people that were talking to the Skywalkers. And in moving away from that, in the way that Disney has done and focusing on these new characters, I think they've created a lot of ill will, which led to, a fan boycott, or at least lack of interest, to see Solo, which I saw, and spoiler alert, I actually liked. Solo was another troubled production. I think the Lord brothers, Christopher Lord and Phil Lord, were scheduled to direct and make the movie. They famously got booted out by Kathleen Kennedy and crew. Kathleen Kennedy is steering the ship at Lucasfilm for Disney, and the same thing happened with Rogue One. Kathleen Kennedy's crew booted out Gareth Edwards while he was directing over creative differences, and the mantle was then handed over to Ron Howard, who I love. Ron Howard. It's really upsetting to me that people have been sleeping on Ron Howard. He has been making some of the best movies that nobody's watching over the past, I want to say, 10 years. Rush with Christopher Hemsworth was an amazing movie. The Heart of the Sea was an amazing movie. Really good old school filmmaking here, folks. And people aren't going to go see him. And Ron Howard also had history with the franchise. Ron Howard starred in American Graffiti, George Lucas's first major film, his seminal film about American life. He released one of his first films, and has a great connection to Lucas in that way. Ron Howard also directed Willow, one of the best fantasy films from the 80s, and Lucas produced that. It had ILM special effects that made Willow the movie it was. I highly recommend you watch Willow. Warwick Davis starred in Willow. He had a role in I'm gonna forget the movie I'm talking. He had a role in Solo. He's a great small person actor, or little person. I think that's the correct way you say that now. And he's had an amazing career in Hollywood. So a lot of things came together with Solo in the old school way. But this boycott, whatever you want to call it, happens, and they boycotted the wrong movie. It's like, great. Solo was a fun film. It wasn't as big in scope. I want to say in terms of certain things, but everyone said the actor wasn't great. I thought the person who played Solo, sorry, I'm forgetting his name in my car. I can't pull up my trusty IMDb here, but he did great. Did I like him as Solo? He can't beat Harrison Ford, but Harrison Ford is also Harrison Ford. I can't knock him for that. But they explained Chewbacca and his relationship. That was great. All the actors did fine. The special effects were amazing. I don't want to spoil Solo if you haven't seen it yet. Please give it a shot. It's a really good movie, and it's a shame that all of this built-up negativity finally came to a head with Solo, when the movie you should probably really watch out for is the next one, whatever that's going to be called. I'm really not excited to see the next J.J. Abrams Star Wars film. He really has a very specific style. He's a very, specific kind of big budget director. I don't want to dump on him too much. He directed Star Trek. I loved Star Trek from 2009. The Star Trek reboot was really, really, really good. Chris Hemsworth's first appearance in a big budget film, ironically enough, so it ties that to Solo with Ron Howard directing. Ron Howard and Chris Hemsworth had the bromance I previously mentioned with the movie Rush and Into the Heart of the Sea. So I can't knock Abrams' work on Star Trek. I wasn't a big fan of his TV shows. I'm not a big fan of the Cloverfield stuff for whatever reason. It just doesn't, work for me too much. A lot of gimmicks, but in The Force Awakens it wasn't for me. In his style, but this goes back to what I think the Disney films. This is to the overall problems with all the Disney films right now, and of all the Disney Star Wars films and what they're doing with the movies. Everyone knocks George Lucas. Everyone throws George Lucas under the bus, and I think that's really wrong. He put so much love into Star Wars: A New Hope, the first Star Wars film. That movie was such a struggle, and so much went right with that movie. And he directed that movie. Okay? He had his fingerprints all over that movie. That is his movie. I don't care what anybody says about the inspirations he took. There's been all sorts of criticisms leveled against him for that movie. That is a George Lucas film. He is the auteur of that movie. And The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi have his fingerprints all over it. And there's a specific film style to Star Wars. There's a specific cadence to Star Wars. There's a specific flow to Star Wars that make it Star Wars. And a lot of that legacy stuff did follow in the footsteps of that. And I feel like Disney has sort of veered away from the core style of the movies, some of the core pacing, and some of the plot. Well, not the plot. They've been recycling the plots, but they're not. I don't know. There's other problems I could talk about with the Disney films, but look, moving forward, let's shift gears to that, because I did say I like Solo. I don't want to spoil it too much. It was actually a good movie, actually worth a watch. So it's like a fun old school movie. But moving forward, I think this is a black eye for Disney. I think this is a black eye for, I hate to say this, like Kathleen Kennedy's leadership of the franchise, because you do have a very stark difference here between Marvel and Disney right now. Both of these are owned by Disney. I'm sorry, Marvel and Star Wars right now. Excuse me, Marvel and Star Wars. Both of these are owned by Disney. But the Marvel films, just everybody loves these films. Everybody keeps going to see these films. Spoiler alert, I loved Infinity War. I've been a huge Marvel fan all my life. Can make a whole separate video about that. But the Disney stuff, when it comes to Star Wars, has been lagging. Marvel has been knocking it out of the park. And I think that this is going to... Solo underperforming in the way it has, both domestically and internationally. More importantly, internationally, Disney's going to have to do a lot of soul searching, and they're going to spin it. A lot of people are going to spin it. I've seen a lot of spin around this movie. I saw one Forbes article that said that Solo failed because it's like a white man in the lead role, which I thought, it's pretty funny. pretty funny way to justify a movie failing. I don't agree with that. But I've seen a lot of different articles, a lot of stuff about, I don't want to go down the toxicity road here, and all this like weird drama about these films and these people who come out of their holes to talk about these films. But I think there's been missteps from the beginning that people were overlooking and putting salve on, like with the plots and all this stuff. And I think if Disney just readjusts some things, they could, build the will up with the fans, but build the goodwill back up with the fans, and can, make it so that everybody's happy when seeing these movies. If they don't, I think we're going to see... the way I sort of see this playing out is if there's another one that comes out... No, well, you know what? Let me put it this way. The next Star Wars film, which is the third in the new trilogy, the core Star Wars trilogy that has been expanded upon with The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. How this movie performs is really going to be the arbiter for how Star Wars goes moving forward. If that movie underperforms the way Solo does, it's going to be a big disaster for Disney. It's going to be a big black eye for Disney, and you are probably going to see nowhere near as many Star Wars films as Marvel films. And I'm willing to bet solid money on that. It's going to be very interesting to see what J.J. Abrams does. It's going to be interesting to see where they go with it. But I personally, like I said, I am not a fan of The Last Jedi. I was not a fan of The Last Jedi. I'm not... just so many things were wrong. Like, they didn't even explain who Snoke was. They didn't even try to explain who Snoke was. They just killed him. And I just, like, things like that. Like, I'm pretty much done. But of course, I've said that before, and then I've gone ahead and taken my entire family to watch movies, just because I was bored on a Saturday night. So take that with a grain of salt. But anyway, folks, this was the editor-in-chief's brief video post-mortem on Solo. I think it's really sad that people didn't go see this movie. It was actually a good movie. If this was the result of a fan boycott or disinterest, it's a shame. Ron Howard's a great director. The cast did a great job. The movie was a lot of fun. I mean, it's a shame. Danny Glover as Lando Calrissian, fantastic job. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my ramblings here. Please forgive if it's a bit disorganized. This is my first time making YouTube videos, so, I might be personally making a YouTube video, so please have mercy in the comments. But do let us know what you think, please. Like, subscribe, comment down below. We are watching. We will respond. By the way, go to actionagogo.com. You can see my articles. You can see Troy's articles. You can see all of our writers' articles. We are a real website, folks. We are bringing you the good action news every day. So please go to our website, read some articles, and have a good time. Okay? And again, hope you enjoyed this video, and do keep in touch.